Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing good and enjoying your day so far. More drama going into the Esports World Cup as the tournament officially confirms last night the coaches will be back talking in real time to the players for the first time in the Call of Duty world in basically a decade. So much reaction to this last night because this change seemingly came out of nowhere. The coaches only informed yesterday with the rest of the community as we found out at the same time. The overwhelming reaction from the players or the coaches is on the negative side, but this will definitely spice up a tournament. Who's it going to help? Who's it potentially going to hinder? Very much into your perspective in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. We have plenty of clips to get into and things to talk about today. We are going to start with Damon Carmabano because it was his birthday yesterday, Mr. 5 Rings, and he may well be, well he will be I'd imagine, unless JP's going to do it, on the main stage with OpTic Texas out at Esports World Cup. So let's just get into it, right, because this is pretty crazy stuff. I will quickly just take you through the rosters. These are not the groups, by the way, just to keep in mind. So I'm not really sure why they've put them in this order, but these aren't the groups in the order that they're in, but just to say, okay, these are 8 of the 16 teams that are at the tournament. These are their rosters, as we know. Some changes have been made. So Diamondcon to Gentamate, for example, Gwinn in for Cloud9, and, well, we maybe would have had the Ravens there, but of course that didn't happen because they were disqualified, and therefore we have 5 Fears attending the tournament instead. Beans on Team Orchid, of course, off the Toronto team. That's going to be Abe, CleanX, Insight, and JoeDeceives representing Movistar Koi. So those are the rosters if you guys are unfamiliar, but this was the big confirmation of last night, and this is like a really big deal, especially the timing that it happens, and not gonna lie, I'm pretty fascinated to see how this change plays out. I think over the last few years, it has been a big discussion in the scene. What if we brought back coaches onto the stage, real-time coaching for the players? And I think the general feeling of myself has been that I'm not sure I like the idea because does it reduce a skill gap? And I've kind of been banging that drum, and that's mainly the drum that's been getting banged last night by the community, because, you know, it's a general consensus that this could affect, well, it does affect the communication of the players in the game and the importance of that in the outcome of the matches. But I think the community over the last few years has been pretty split on this idea, and there has been a real perception that it would be pretty cool to see it back, to see how it played out. So I'm not surprised by the overwhelming negative reaction to it, but I think there's a lot of us in the community that are like, yeah, I might not agree with it, but I'm pretty damn excited to see how it's actually going to play out, and it does spice up the tournament for sure. So it was confirmed that for Black Ops 6, rules update, coaches will be allowed on stage to provide real-time coaching. Now, notably, they can provide real-time coaching in Hardpoint and Search and Destroy, or Hardpoint and Control, crucially, not in Search. So in Search, usually how it is the coach comes on stage, he puts the headset on, and he talks to the team. Obviously, he can talk to them before the first map, and then after map 1, he's like, all right, well done, lads, 1-0 up. We're going to our invasion, search, and destroy. I don't know why I'm living a year in the past. We're going to this search. This is what they do. This is what you guys have got to keep in mind. But then when the game starts, they take the headset off, they get off the stage, right? So they can comm with the players between the maps, but not during the map. Now, in search, it's going to be between rounds, so they can't comm mid-round, which is probably a good decision, to be honest. You don't want the coach probably to be able to call the strats in real time in Search and Destroy. I think that does... I mean, look, we're going to talk about the skill gap and the effects that it might have, but if I'm a coach and I can see all 4 of my players' perspectives, maybe I, not playing the game, can just call the shots, be like, all right, yeah, 3v3, let's just go A, right? Like, because he can see where everybody is, what they see. Because, let's say I'm the in-game leader and my teammate who's sitting 2 seats down from me, he sees somebody and he says, oh, I saw them doing this, but like often the real-time comms are going to translate what he saw in reality, and then the in-game leader's going to hear that. But if I'm the coach and I can literally see all of their screens, I can maybe make a more accurate read in terms of what the team should do, like in a mid of the search and destroy round. Now, the same kind of applies in respawn as well. We'll get to that in a second. But in search, they will be able to come in between rounds, say, okay, we need to adapt like this, we need to adapt like that. And that's probably pretty cool, to be fair. But again, it raises the question as to whether the players should be the ones coming up with those decisions, or whether the coach should be able to contribute to it. Because yeah, it does create a coaching skill gap. If my coach is better than yours, then it's actually going to mean something. But maybe it shouldn't mean more than the players themselves being better in terms of comms. And then in hardpoint and control, it's going to be real time. So they're going to be able to speak with their team in real time in the comms. And as I say, it's the first time this has happened for pretty much a decade. Back in the day when this did used to happen, it's got to be said, we weren't getting much actual communication from the coaches, right? They were just talking trash, basically, on the other team. Or, they would just be sitting there talking about, all right, 20 seconds left to rotate. If you guys remember when, I think Pamaj, he coached OpTic, technically, at ESWC, not the Esports World Cup, but ESWC was an event that they used to run in Paris back in 2014, 2015. I think he coached them, technically, in 2015, and pretty much what they told him is like, all right, Pam, just when there's 20 seconds left on the hill, just tell us to rotate, or say 20 seconds. And that's all he did, I think. He just stood there and he called out 20 seconds. Now, nowadays, the coaches can and will get far more involved. Here's Clayster getting a bit of practice in at the Falcons HQ yesterday before their game. So this did pretty much come out of nowhere. Now, we're going to go through some of the reaction, then we're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Purge says, hell nah. Now, he deleted this tweet, but, unlucky. Ball doesn't lie. If you put something on the internet, it's going to get screenshotted. So Purge, one of the only players ready to comment on it. There was plenty of coaches, of course, but the general reaction from many of the former players, such as Method, says, communication is one of the few skill gaps we have these days. Your poor comms should penalise you, not be saved by a coach on stage. So there's a couple of angles here as a coach on stage with the headset on, communicating with the team in real time in terms of what they can do. Now, I think a lot of coaches, it's probably not going to change all that much. They may just see certain things happening and make a little comm or say, okay, we're missing this player. Because when you're playing in real time, you've got to make the decisions in real time. The skill gap to then say, like, I was really impressed, for example, with OpTic Huke, especially. There was a Hacienda map, it was at the World Championship, and I think it was on the rotation to P2. And he was very attuned to which exact player they were missing on the map. He knew they'd killed Drazah, they'd killed Simp, they'd killed Cellium, and they were looking for aBeZy, right? They knew that there was one more guy in that wave that they needed to find, and they didn't know where he is. They were thinking about where he was, and they were like, and Huke was like, okay, looking for aBeZy. And then they found him, they took him down, and they knew, therefore, that they didn't have to worry about anyone being behind them, and they could focus all their attention once again forward. That's very important in hardpoint to have that skill. And lots of teams and, players and communicators are just better at that than others, right? Like, some players are just better at that, playing the game and also keeping track of the macro. But if my coach can just do it for me, then, I don't have to think about that. The coach is, like, let's say the coach says, all right, my job is just to track players on rotation, and I'll just tell you guys, okay, we're looking for aBeZy, we're looking for Cellium or whatever, and therefore it takes that idea out of the hands of the players. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Maybe there's a skill gap from the coaching perspective. Maybe the players should be able to get hold of that. The big concern that I've had with coaches being on stage is not necessarily that point. I'm a little bit more concerned about a coach literally just communicating for a player, like 90% of the time. Let's say one of my players is just not good at communicating, like they just don't call out well. They play much better when they just shoot. Now, obviously you want to develop and hone that skill, and you're never going to know exactly what's going through the head of a player. So if a player is trying to say, okay, I'm going to come and help you in the back or whatever, if I'm a coach and I'm watching him play, I can't com that for him because I don't know the decision that he's going to make, but I can tell him in real time what to do, be like, yo, Cell, help Simp or whatever in the back. Maybe that's possible. And maybe that's a decision that he wouldn't have made on his own, right? So, I don't know, it gets very interesting. But what if I just call out for Cell? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying Cell's communication is bad, although if I was his teammate, I'm not sure I'd be able to understand what he was saying. But what if I just say, all right, like, whoever it is, I'm just going to literally call out for you this whole map, and I'm going to stand behind you, I'm going to call out for you, and I'm just going to be the comms guy for this particular player. I don't think anyone's going to do that, certainly not for this event with the short turnaround, but it's not an impossibility that teams could do that if this was allowed. So Octane says, could not be a bigger L, this is genuinely awful. Bean says, I'd be mind blown if any coaches are spitting comms mid-map. Imagine hitting old and your coach just calls you an idiot. Swords rotating, wait, he's hitting old? So, like if Marky B screams dead in the comms, who knows what's going to happen, right? Shane saying Octane to Doda, right? I mean, look, who knows what used to happen back in the day? Well, we know what used to happen back in the day. Mostly it was just coaches talking trash. And EasyMac says, love this for a one-off tournament. Don't think it should be permanent. Because I think, look, there is an implication here. What does it mean for the context around EWC? We know the event is not the World Championship. It's not got the money of the World Championship. It's not got the prestige of the World Championship. Maybe not yet, in terms of what Scrappy said the other day. But it's also a single elimination tournament. The patch might be a bit funky. You know, the game, it's probably not going to be the cleanest experience of all time. And in addition to that, yes, single elim has kind of been the big one that people devalue the tournament with. Now, they're throwing in some other stuff, right? Now, coaches are on the stage. That is going to change the dynamics. Is it going to restrict how much the teams think of this event in hindsight when it comes to making roster decisions? I don't necessarily think so, but it might be a relevant factor in the way the tournament is considered. And I do think that if you're going to make this change for this particular tournament, probably isn't going to be a change for the CDL next year, but who knows if it goes well. I'm just fascinated to see how it goes, to see what the reaction from the players and the coaches will be after the tournament, because yeah, if you're going to make it a bit of a showcase, then in my opinion, the World Cup should just say, look, put in Fringe. Let's bring snipers in. I don't know, force the pros to use snipers. Something like that. Because if you're going to make these changes, you might as well go full showcase, in my opinion. But intrigued to your thoughts in a comment. Octane says, I'm praying this is only an EWC thing, and hopefully CDL doesn't adapt to this. The only skill gap remaining in COD is the player's ability to make split-second decisions and understand the game. Anything to reduce that further is awful for our sport. Jacob says, but it makes coaches more impactful. So, maybe, good for the actual coaches. This I thought was pretty funny when Mr. X was used to coach the Complexity team. This is actually after Clayster got dropped and he was screaming across the stage. That's why you got dropped, Clay. And basically all he did was be a hype guy and just talk trash. That's how it used to be. And that was pretty fun. But it got banned kind of for that reason. And also kind of because there was the skill gap related discussion that we've just had. Clay says he hates it. Like, he's not a big fan of this change, and that is the general perception. JP, though, says, because this was kind of the big one, EasyMac is like, I wonder if the teams knew about this, because if they did, then they would have been practicing this way for weeks. But if they had have done it, we would have seen some tweets about it, let's be honest. So JP says, yeah, we found out today. The teams are going to fly out there in a few days. They have only a few days to prep here. And it's going to be interesting to see, okay, what OpTic decide. Is JP going to, be there for hardpoint control? Is Karma going to be there? Who's going to do what? And what are they going to call out? Because it is a debate which teams benefit from this and which teams do not necessarily. Hixie says, don't expect coaches to actually be comming mid-map. They might just call out they're missing some players. To be fair, this is a thing in Halo, right? I'm still sure that's pretty much a thing. Obviously, that game's a bit different with power-ups and stuff like this that you've got to go and collect and call it out about when that's online. I don't know, it's an interesting change. And Den says, look, trying to look at it in the optimistic way, if a player has to be told what to do and isn't making that split-second decision as soon as the game state changes, they're going to be too late for it anyway, which is possibly true. And maybe it's not going to be too invasive. I just think it's really interesting, the implications. JP says, not the biggest fan of the rule. I think comms are a major skill gap, but I agree that it's going to be pretty limited to certain situations. And most of the time, the coaches probably aren't going to be doing that much. The question is, who benefits from this? Because in theory, the teams that have weaker comms that maybe need the assistance of a coach should be in a better position. Or maybe the teams that have a really inspired coach. Like, I think Rambo Ray could potentially do a really good job on Surge to understand, okay, what needs to be said and when. Is Crowder going to be there with the headset on talking with the FaZe guys? I think at times I would say that FaZe's comms have been a weakness for them over the last few years. So maybe this could be a decision that helps the FaZe guys. I'm not sure there's enough time, really, for the players and the coaches to understand exactly what they should do. If they were practicing with this for a month, they'd probably get it pretty nailed down. But I think it is going to be fascinating to watch this unfold in the upcoming week. So very much interested to your thoughts in a comment. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
Oh my god, 7's through. Asim's through. Asim's through. They have no clue. They have no clue. Hop the point, Asim. Hop the fucking point. Get on the fucking point, Asim. Get on the point. Bring them backwards. Asim, bring them backwards. Get on the point. Get on the point. Get on the point.
Special guys.
No.
Get on the point.
Get
on B.
No. He said no.
B.
He gotta be stuck. He gotta be stuck in the bus, right? He gotta be stuck in the bus, right?
Go B. We're going Bravo. Get on the point.
You're trying to clarify that was my idea.
Get on the point. Our teammates are getting Get on the point.
Getting spawn killed, Asem. You gotta do something, man.
Get on the point.
Everybody relax.
Asem,
He's tweaking. He's tweaking.